Hello,
Okay, fine.
Mr. Gauin. How are you today?
Hello. I'm well, thank you. And you?
I'm also well. It is nice to see you, and hope everything is okay. And actually, we talked to you a long time ago and planned to have this meeting, but
Yes.
unfortunately, we couldn't hold the meeting due to the different reasons. And like since then, very interesting events took place during this time period. As
Yes.
a matter of fact, developments took place in Azerbaijan against the backdrop of the Karabakh victory and else.
Indeed.
And also, I would like to tell that I was once particularly interested in your research area, and now we have left behind one of the most interesting conflicts in today's world, which was Karabakh
Mhm.
conflict. And it was very interesting that since then the Armenian lobby, especially in France, in Western countries, accused Azerbaijan of ethnic cleansing through the media. If we briefly touch upon its history, there may be some who don't know it yet. What is the history of the Armenian lobby in France? Could you evaluate it a little bit for us?
I mean, the
Background of
first,
the,
the first attempt dates back 1860s. So
yeah.
you see, 160 years ago, 160 years ago, but it failed. For decades, it failed. To summarize briefly, there was a short period, 1886, 1897, when they got some success, but it was primarily because uh, we had a centrist cabinet at that time, and opponents of both left and right used the Armenian issue against the cabinet. But the
Mhm.
cabinet was unmoved by this attempt, and due to the Dreyfus affair was a judiciary scandal. I have no time to elaborate on that, but
Yeah.
it provoked the explosion of the pro-Armenian group. And then for decades, it failed again. Most of their attempts were failure or were very short-lived.
Mhm.
Then they very slowly, in mid-1960s, at the instigation of the Soviet Union, started again with the move of the Armenian Revolutionary Federation to the
Mhm.
Soviet side after 20 years on the American side. But it was very slow. It took time, contrary to the US, for example, when they already had strong links with some politicians. It's only around 1980 that they start obtaining some successes. But due to terrorism, due to the smarter policy of Turkey, by 1985, they were already on decrease.
Mhm.
And something I want to emphasize, it is a case in France, but it's also the case in America, for example, they are divided. They fought each other, including physically.
Ah, interesting.
Sometimes in Lebanon, they killed each other, literally.
Mm.
We should stop thinking about Armenian nationalists as being united. It does not exist. So I continue. There was a very important moment in the 1990s, partly due to the First Karabakh War, actually,
Mhm.
partly due to the collapse of the Soviet Union, which for the first time, the Dashnaks and the other Armenian groups start working together,
Mhm.
which in France was completely unprecedented. It was around 1983. And eventually, it became the Coordination Council of France's Armenian Association in 2001. So, but after the recognition of the so-called Armenian claims, the Armenian nationalists gave the priority to a bill which will abolish freedom of speech on the tragedy of 1915, but they failed systematically. I have no time to give you the full list, which is not very interesting actually. All were rejected by the parliament or censored by the Constitutional Council. And meanwhile, there was a new division between Armenians from the post-Ottoman space
Mhm.
and Armenians from the Caucasus. And Armenians from the Caucasus told the previous one, the traditional establishment,
Mhm.
1915 is not the main issue. You spend your whole time in commemoration and in attempt of communization bill. We don't care about that. We just
Yeah.
can commemorate among ourselves. The priority should be the Karabakh. You don't care about the Karabakh enough. And obviously, this tension exploded again during the 2020 war, when plenty of extremists from the Caucasus said, "We told you so." We told you, so look how you failed. Look what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And moreover, in 2010, since 2010, the Coordination Council of France's Armenian Associations is dominated by the Dashnaks and by former Assala spokesperson Jean-Marc Aratorania. And this leadership is deeply detested, including among the most traditional Armenian nationalists, the Nchaks, for example, because they say and this is basically true, they behave like dictators. When they lose internal elections of the community, they declare it is against the rules, so they don't respect the result of the election, etc. And they fail, as I said, for the communication bill and concerning Azerbaijan. So the divisions among Armenian nationalists in France were never so tense since late 1980s.
But it's interesting that they are still in the, they have lobbying is a kind of an art in the politics, and
Yes.
they do it very well, actually. We see that French Senate was once took the part of Armenia's side, and also in Germany they are doing kind of okay, and in California also. What is the secret underlying of this power? Do you think so?
I mean, first of all, we should distinguish according to the countries and according to the moment.
Yes.
There is no monocausal explanation. If we look for that, we just fail. I shall start with France, but I will continue with Germany and US. Concerning France, there is something which has been misunderstood or underestimated in Turkey and even more in Azerbaijan, namely the change of 2017 in our domestic policy. For decades, we had a classical left-right, a bit like in Britain, a bit like in Germany, left-right bipartisan situation. And due to plenty of phenomena, I have no time to elaborate right now, this partly collapsed and the new party of Emmanuel Macron emerged. But the Senate, for example, is not elected directly by the population. It is elected mostly by the municipal councils. And Mr. Macron's party has a very poor local implementation. So it is very strong for the presidential and legislative election, but not for the local election. That's why the group in the Senate is small. Beside that, the president of the Senate, Gérard Larcher, until 2017, he was one of the most hated men by Armenian nationalists. He was linked to Turkey, and even today, he has no high opinion of the Armenians, and I insist, not just Armenian nationalists, but the Armenians in general. For the traditional, even not conservative bourgeoisie in France, an Armenian is a crook. Period. Even those like Mr. Larcher who now work with them, it's not about love, it's not about Christianity, it's not about that at all. In his case, it is all about poisoning the life of Mr. Macron, like in 1886, 1897.
Yes.
Because the senators perfectly knew France will never recognize the so-called Karabakh Republic. They knew it. They knew it was a non-binding resolution without any legal effect, and that's why they voted that so freely.
Do you think in the future that France's attitude on the South Caucasus might change after this conflict's end? Do you think there is a reason?
It depends what you mean by attitude. Just to remind you, during the war, one pro-Armenian MP asked the Macron administration to end the military contract with Azerbaijan. All were fully implemented. 2020 was a nice year for the military exports to Azerbaijan, and it continued in 2021 and 2022. And just a small incidental remark. Why did you win in this year in September so quickly? Because you have a strong army, obviously, but being strong is not enough in front of fanatics. It's because you were able to locate each of the 25 top leaders of the separatist entity, and you were in position to tell them, if you don't capitulate, we will kill you, and we will kill you properly, cleanly. It will not provoke side casualties. So you cannot use your compatriots as human shields. And it's partly because of Israeli weapons, partly because of Turkish weapons, and partly because of French satellites and radars and lasers.
Interesting facts.
But of course, I'm not saying that the clumsy statements are negligible. I'm in Baku, so I'm well aware of the negative effect of such statements. I think both sides need to make efforts. Azerbaijan needs to understand that while they spend millions of dollars in the US for public relations, France deserves, considering the issue, not the same budget, of course, because it's not the same population, but a budget. And in France, I think Mrs. Colonna has to move. Mr. Macron is considering her departure, and frankly, it would be a good idea, for example, but there will be other examples to change in France. Mm-hmm. But in making efforts on both sides, I think we can reduce the tensions very easily. I mean, last spring, spring of last year in 2022, it was not like that at all. Mm-hmm. So it was a degradation. It was the problems started mostly in September, October 2022. So you see, it's something recent. But to finish to reply, to answer one of your questions, in Germany, for example, it's not primarily due to the Armenian community because it's a small community, largely from Turkey, and the nationalists among them are a tiny number. It is more about the fact that Germany is a much more religious society, and it is about the fact that a part of the German politicians use the Armenian issue to trivialize the Holocaust and the Nazi crimes in general. This is something that dates back to the beginning of 1990s. Until recently, it was mostly against Turkey, but now it is used against Azerbaijan as well. And concerning the US, it is primarily because of the size of the Armenian community and because of the fact that there is a real militant basis for Armenian nationalism in the US. They can organize significant demonstrations, they can organize significant fundraising, etc. And California is the worst state in this regard.
Interesting. And finally, I would like to ask you that I noticed that you mostly touched on issues related to Ukrainian Russian war in your Twitter profile. I was just checking up, and since we continue on research on conflicts in our center also, and lastly, I would like to also ask you about that. Like, how do you see the outcome of this war? It seems like it has now reached an interesting point. We see that there is some advance by Russian army, and there are some skirmishes still going around. How do you see, and how it will affect on the long term in the balance of inner policy of European Union?
There are two aspects in your question: the war itself and the impact on the European Union.
Yes, exactly.
Concerning the war itself, the Ukrainians recovered something like 500 square kilometers during the last months. It's of course less than expected, but the Russian losses in material, in the proved losses, proved by photos or videos, the Russian losses are 3 times the Ukrainian losses. And meanwhile, besides the deliveries of European and American weapons, there are no licenses to produce European weapons in Ukraine. Germany gave a license to produce tanks. France and Sweden gave license to produce infantry armored vehicles. France gave license to produce our very new combat unmanned aircraft, bombing drone. UK is producing shells partly in UK, partly in Ukraine. So the capacities of the Ukrainian defense industry today and tomorrow will be not comparable to what it was not even 2 years ago. So for the long-term war, Ukraine is becoming much stronger. And the Russian defense industry is maybe not as bad as some people expected last year, but it is completely unable to challenge such an effort. And we can see that with the tanks, for example. the majority of the tanks destroyed by Ukrainians at the beginning of the war were Russian-made, namely produced after 1981. Currently, the majority is Soviet-made, produced before 1981. And during the last months, the quality, the age of these tanks is decreasing. Just an example, the T-80 tanks, at the end of the invasion, Russia had 433 active T-80 tanks. 642 T-80 tanks have been demolished or seized by the Ukrainians, which means they took from the stocks T-80 which were not modernized, which were in very poor quality storage. So their current T-80 are not the same than before. So there is clearly an incapacity of the Russian defense industry to replace the lost material by material of the same quality. And concerning the human losses, it is perfectly obvious that the Russian command does not care that much about the human losses, especially for the land army. But the capacity of the Russian society to accept such losses is not the same than during the Second World War, because the context is completely different. And you may remember, you may know, you are too young to remember, and I'm too young to remember, but to know about the Afghanistan war, where the human losses of the Soviet Union were much less.
Yes, exactly.
But still, it is one of the reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed. So, which much more significant human losses, it already has an impact on the Russian society, and this impact will be worse and worse across the time. So now, regarding the impact on the European Union, there are several aspects. First, we could look at a big success. At the end of the war, even some months later, actually, plenty of people were scared that European Union depends on Russian gas too much. But the thing is, since the end of 2022, European Union stopped importing Russian gas, partly thanks to Azerbaijan, actually.
Yeah.
There are new projects of production, as you know. But still, in less than a year, the main asset of Russia disappeared, purely and simply. Also, the nuclear program, which had civil nuclear program, which had diminished, unfortunately, after the Fukushima accident, relaunch in countries such as France, but also in Finland. The German opposition advocates a return to nuclear power. So some common sense is back in Europe concerning energy, which is fundamental. And for the moment, the quantity and the quality of military material sent to Ukraine is only increasing. For example, last year, even UK did not want to send battle tanks. No, UK, Germany, other countries sent battle tanks to Ukraine, and there is no popular opposition to that. The long-range missiles are not taboo anymore. UK send it, France send it, US are slowly send it, Germany may send it. So the amount of European help is increasing. No, it's more significant than the American help, something very few people would have predicted 18 months ago. So the resilience of European Union as a whole, I think, is not bad. Is anyway much better than what plenty of observers felt in February, March 2022.
That was
it is true that there are some economic difficulties, but these difficulties are not only due to the Russian war, and actually some of them could be partly fixed by this Russian war. And I have especially in mind the fact that the German electricity is too expensive, because wind and solar energy, especially in Germany, solar energy is fine in North Africa or Spain. But when you go to Germany for holidays, you don't go for sun.
Interesting. That's right.
So the fact that they purely and simply abandoned the nuclear power was a major error. they slowly start realizing it is a major error. Now the other countries don't accept this German blackmail anymore. So they are understanding that cheap Russian gas was an illusion, was a source of problem actually, and they are looking for a more efficient source for producing electricity. And on the long term, I think it will benefit European economy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gauin. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
that you actually put your time and effort on this. It was a delightful interview. We had some nice topics that we discussed about, and your opinions are well welcomed on our kind of podcast. Thank you so much, and
My
hope
pleasure.
to see you soon in the future also. Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
See you.
Bye.
And have a nice National Revival Day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.